We'll get started. So, in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231, adequate notice of this regular meeting of the Planning Board of the Township of Franklin has been provided. And everybody, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes. Councilman Chase. Mr. Coble asked to be excused. He's on vacation. Mr. LaCourte.
Here.
Ms. MacGyver.
Here.
Mr. Mettler.
Here.
Mr. Pettit.
Here.
Mr. Stevens.
Here.
Mr. Thomas.
Here.
Mr. Alderman asked to be excused. He's sick. Mr. Onyaka said he'll be attending, but he'll be a little bit late. And Chairman Orsini.
Here. Okay, so first item on the agenda is minutes. First one from January the 16th, 2013. If there's any comments, let me know. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Ms. MacGyver.
Yes.
Mr. Mettler.
Yes.
Mr. Pettit.
Yes.
Mr. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Chairman Orsini.
Yes. Minutes from February 6th, 2013 meeting.
If there's no discussion, I move to approve.
Second.
Ms. MacGyver.
Yes.
Mr. Mettler.
Yes.
Mr. Pettit.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Chairman Orsini.
Yes. Okay, for resolutions, we have, the first one is Gilberto Mercado, PLN 080003.
There's no discussion, I move to approve.
Second.
Mr. LaCourte.
Yes.
Ms. MacGyver.
Yes.
Mr. Mettler.
Yes.
Mr. Pettit.
Yes.
Mr. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Chairman Orsini.
Yes. And the second resolution is the Redev LLC, PLN 130001.
There's no discussion, I move to approve.
Second.
Ms. MacGyver.
Yes.
Mr. Mettler.
Yes.
Mr. Pettit.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Chairman Orsini.
Yes. Okay. Moving on, the vouchers, the February retainer, the March retainer, Kings Row Homes litigation cost, and miscellaneous. Any exactly idea what miscellaneous might be?
I don't know.
Just for transparency's sake. All right.
I can look into that for you, though.
Just, yeah, please. I always like to, but we'll approve it, but it's.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm sure it's legitimate, just like to know what it is. Can we
You
just,
can do it by affirmation.
can we do all of them together?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll just vote on all of those together. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I noticed Kings Row Homes. I wondered if we could have sort of an update as to where things stand with that.
We could do that in executive session.
Yeah, that would be appropriate for executive session, and it would probably be a good idea to put on a different agenda as
Yeah,
well.
'cause we didn't. I don't know if we have, well,
We could do it
we
tonight.
could do it tonight.
The fact of the matter is, I'm not handling that litigation, so I really wouldn't have much to add to it.
Okay.
So-
Well, in that case, might we have it on the agenda for the next
Absolutely.
That,
meeting?
that would be fine, that's my recommendation.
Yeah, that would be
Marty,
fine.
be better to talk about that?
Yeah, even if I'm here next time, just to get filled in
Okay.
with what's going on.
That's absolutely fine. Okay, so we now have a bunch of ordinances that we had previously reviewed at the last meeting, and they went to council, correct? And council is forwarding them to us, as usual, for the very last time. And there are no changes in any of these ordinances except for 4007-13 Trap Rock, and Mark will explain what's different there.
Yeah, it's entirely consistent in intent compared to what you had previously recommended in the zoning ordinance and the master plan. The exception being that the location where the administrative offices are, there was a concern about having that in the M3 zone. So the revised proposal is to have that in the RR5 zone with some language added that basically grandfathers in the administrative offices of Trap Rock, but not allowing mining on that site, so that we would not have, the concern was that the ordinance as originally drafted would allow mining to come closer to Route 27, even though that wasn't the intent of the ordinance or Trap Rock's plan. But there was a concern that that could happen at some time in the future. These changes would eliminate that possibility.
You had mentioned that to us before, I think.
I'm sorry?
You had mentioned that to us before,
Yeah,
I
that was,
believe.
yes, that was the concern. I think
Yeah.
we briefed the board on the concern that was raised at council. So the draft ordinance was revised, and it's certainly consistent with the master plan amendment because it does exactly the same thing, just a slightly different way to go about it.
And Mr. Chairman, the reason for tonight is to make the determination that these ordinances are consistent with the master plan, and of course, to recommend, if the board's so fit, you wrote them, for the council to adopt them.
Now, do we have to, if we deem them compliant, which they are, because with the exception of what Mark just said, and that's compliant too, nothing has changed from when we first recommended them to council. Can we approve that in mass, or do we have to
Yes,
do it
you can
each
do
one?
them all together.
Wonderful. So,
And for the record, Councilman Chase arrived at 7:40, so he's now here and eligible to vote.
excellent. If nobody has a problem with that, we can just do them in mass, okay. So I'll make a motion that we forward each of these ordinances to council as compliant with the master plan.
Move to approve.
Okay. Can we,
You can do them.
affirmation?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
And Mr. Chairman, before you get to the regular agenda, we did unfortunately forget to put one thing on the agenda that needs to be carried. Route 27 School LLP, Block 3401, lots 3402, 3403, 3404. It's an application PLN 13-0005 for an amended site plan that will not be heard this evening. It will be heard in 2 weeks from tonight. There will be no further notification for that. So if anyone's here for that this evening, it'll be heard 2 weeks from tonight at 7:30 in this room.
So our hearings tonight are two. First one will be Jane Center, PLN 13-00013.
Do you want to give her a quick?
Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there,
It's Somerset County Cultural and Heritage Commission.
yeah,
It's a brief announcement.
we'll just do that as part of the discussion.
Thank you very much for being here. My name is Bessie Havens, and I'm here simply to call your attention to our Historic Preservation Symposium on Saturday, April 27th. It's open to anyone, but we really hope that people from planning boards will attend. We have speakers from the state, from the county. We have historic preservation professionals. You'll notice that your own Wayne McCabe is one of our speakers, so you know the top floor. And just going to be short as we can make it and still get the information in. You'll be having time for lunch because we know you are busy people. So we hope to see some of you there.
It's at Saturday, April 27th, 9 to 1, 40 North Bridge Street in Somerville. All right, thank you.
Thank you. A worthwhile event. Okay, Peter.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Peter Lanfrit, appearing on behalf of the applicant. This is an application for a site plan approval for the construction of a solar array in the parking lot of a property known as Block 468.07, Lot 45, located on Cedar Grove Lane, which is currently being used as a religious institution owned by the Jane Center of New Jersey. I will this evening call two witnesses, the site engineer and also a representative, Mr. Voss, of the company that will be installing the solar panels, should the board grant the appropriate approvals. There is one variance that we are seeking, which is a side yard variance. Mr. Ardman will explain that variance to you. We will rely on two exhibits, and I'm going to mark them now. For the record, I have marked a colored rendering of a plan entitled Site and Landscaping Plan SP1, which was prepared by Reynolds Engineering. The second exhibit, which will be a handout, I will mark one of them as A2. Are a composite of photographs of solar arrays over parking lots to give the board a picture of what we are proposing.
I think it's actually three. 1, 2, 3 cars. Oh, see how it is here? See what it is? See? 3.
Okay,
We're parking between the,
so it's functional.
yeah, there's a good picture.
Thank you, Peter.
And if you walk in the garage, just, you know what the garage is, just right, and when you go right through, huh?
Let's see here. Let's innovative.
Is there, oh, that's it, yeah, that's it.
Didn't we?
That's the one.
We did for the hospital, there's a park on Somerset.
Oh, well, the garage is set up just like this.
Wait, we're not Davidson or something?
I would like to call as my first witness, Mr. Ardman.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Mr. Ardman.
And board,
Mr. Ardman, what is your occupation?
licensed professional engineer and professional planner, state of New Jersey, principal of the firm The Reynolds Group, and have testified before this board more than a few times.
Yeah, your expertise.
Okay, and you'll be
Thank you.
testifying this evening both as the engineer who prepared the site plan and also as a professional planner, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Lanford. Thank you, Mr. Orsini.
Mr. Ardman, I have marked Exhibit A1, which is the site plan which you prepared. Can you briefly indicate to the board what the existing conditions are on the site at this time?
Certainly. So, Exhibit A1 is Peter marked. On the right side of the plan is Cedar Grove Lane. The property in question is outlined in color, and the red outline we have. North is basically up and to the left a little bit. The existing conditions are the driveway which comes in off of Cedar Grove Lane into the parking area which surrounds the existing Jane Center building. That was before this board several years ago, has been since constructed. It's approximately a 42,000 square foot facility. There are approximately 328 parking stalls. That's what is shaded in gray, 328 parking stalls on the site. An existing detention basin is located in the bottom right corner, which is basically the south corner of the property. The property is just over 9.5 acres. To the north of the site, you can see the edge of a parking lot, which is for an office building to the north of the property. Across Cedar Grove Lane is the shopping center. To the south is a vacant property. And to the west are single-family residences. Between our property and those single-family residences are the pipeline, the Texas Eastern Pipeline that cuts through, 100-foot wide right-of-way. It is wooded on the far side of that pipeline between us and the neighbors, and a small other stretches are wooded as well against the parking area on our side of the pipeline and between us and the neighbor to the north for the office building.
Okay, one quick question concerning the driveway that is depicted on your plan.
Yep.
Is that the current location of the driveway, or is that a different location?
Good point, Mr. Lanford. This is a shifted location. We have administrative approval from the township and approval from the county to adjust that driveway. Basically, it goes pretty much straight out now, and it does not line up with the driveway across the street. And to get better flow into the site and also to align those, we proposed a redesign of that driveway, hopefully to be built this summer, but this shows the relocated section of the driveway.
Okay, so the existing driveway will be removed and will be moved to the location as depicted on the plan?
That's correct.
And that has already been approved administratively here in Franklin Township, not part of this application, and we're still ironing out some items with the county before we can start construction, is that correct?
Yeah, technical with the county is complete. Some other bond issues is all we have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardman.
Yep.
Now, can you indicate to the board what we are proposing this evening?
Certainly. The solar panels that we're proposing are going to be basically a canopy or a carport style. And those are shown in the tan shaded areas, which are placed throughout the lot. And they have call-outs on the plan in front of you, single canopy with module sizes, et cetera. So basically, they're, for most purposes, 20-foot wide, single canopies, and they will be on covering the existing parking spaces, one stall deep parking space in these locations, which I'm outlining, and some to the south here I'm outlining. There is basically a dual style, double canopy in the center on the southwest side of the property here, so those will be a 40-foot wide canopy, again, with the cars under both sides of those canopies. Those canopies will be supported by a metal frame posts, which will be into the parking area. There'll be new hairpin striping on the parking area to surround those posts for the canopies. The closest point is 19 feet to the northern property line as the spot of the variance which we'll be seeking, which I'll discuss. The other dimensions to the single-family residence from the canopies I'm showing here is approximately 270 feet with approximately 120 feet of wooded area. There's 165 feet to the residence in the southern corner or the southwest corner here that I'm pointing at, 165 feet from the canopies to the residence in those areas.
Okay, in addition to constructing the solar arrays over the parking lot, as a result of meetings that we have had with the township staff, and I understand members of your office visited the site with Mr. Healy, your planner, on at least one occasion, if not more than one occasion, are there other things that are being proposed as part of this application to provide buffering and screening of those solar arrays?
Yes, the most obvious kind of visual impact that we were concerned about were the neighbors to the west here, the single-family residents. So yes, the property was walked, and the determination was made to put plantings in a more open area where there's a break in the landscaping in the southwest corner here to shade those closest panels or canopies that we have in this corner here. So landscaping will be placed in that area. This section, which is wooded here, the discussion was to put a solid fence up along that whole stretch, and we've agreed to that. There's just one change, which in talking with the client after we submitted, they were thinking about, and still fully agreed to a solid wood fence, but we'd like to put it up along the property line instead of along the easement. And the purpose for that is, obviously the neighbors here now, I'm sure, know where their rear property is, but over time, if somebody else comes in and sees a fence all the way up here, they tend to creep potentially and encroach. So just so that doesn't become a problem, we'd like to put that fence straight up the property line here. Again, it's going to be a 6-foot-high stockade fence, and that's going to be basically typically 2 to 3 inch solid slats butted up against each other so there's no gaps in the fence. So it should provide a nice screen.
Okay, now with respect to the variance that we are seeking, which is a side yard variance, can you indicate to the board clearly where that variance is?
Certainly. So it's for this stretch of canopies here, the array which is on the northern side of the property, again, butting the parking lot and the commercial or the office building that's to the north of us. It's 19 feet where 25 feet is the minimum required for side yard and accessory use. That area is wooded at the present time. The reason why we cannot bring that further forward is that the canopy would then infringe upon the driveway area, the parking area. And there is a fire lane that comes off of Cedar Grove, which comes straight up that drive. So we've also met along with staff, with your fire official, and that was one of the few things he was concerned about, is to keep those out of the traveling aisle. So we can't pull those forward, or they would be in the traveling aisle.
Okay, and the variance that we're seeking, there is a C variance or a bulk variance, is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you indicate to the board the reasoning why you think that the board should grant the variance in conjunction with this application?
Certainly. Again, we looked at other places to put the canopies. Again, it cannot move forward because of that criteria. We don't think there's any large negative impact on the neighbor. The panels will be facing away from them, and there is wooded area in front of that. The panels could be placed in other areas without a variance in the center parking lot here, but those are much more highly visible to the main driveway coming in and to the traveling public. So we don't think that's a good planning option to put that in that same location. So because of the buffer that we have to the neighbor, our opinion that there's no negative impact to the neighbor, and from a planning standpoint, we think it's a good location to put them. We think the variance is warranted for this site.
Okay. In preparing the site plan, going back to the canopies themselves, and I think I forgot to ask you the question, how high are these canopies?
The minimum height is 9 feet. Basically, at the end, you pull in, and they're tilted back to a little bit over 12 feet high.
So they're not parallel to the ground, they're angled?
They're angled, again, to obviously catch the sun rays at the optimum angle.
Okay. Now, in conjunction with this application, there were certain staff reports that were generated, is that correct?
That's correct.
Peter, just before you go through those, I just ask Mr. Ardman a question. So where the Texas Eastern Pipeline is there, that's completely cleared at this point?
That's correct, through
Yeah.
that.
And
That's
behind that, there's woods.
That's correct.
Would those woods remain?
Yes, they would.
Okay.
The
So-
panels that are in an angle that those woods don't affect. the
That's what I
panels. Right.
hoped
Yes.
and thought.
Yeah.
But the other question is, if you do want to put the fence right along your property line,
Yes.
as a square there, right? Creating essentially a triangle relative to the Texas Eastern, you're essentially going to have to construct that fence through the woods.
Yes. So,
And that's doable without, like, removing a lot of trees?
yeah, our intent is not to do a lot of tree clearing, although there are a lot of cedars back there. There's definitely room if we have to jog the fence a little bit to miss the trees there. We definitely.
Too worried about cedars, will grow anywhere.
Right.
But, if anything of any quality.
That's the 90% of what's back there is cedars.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. Now, what about the little triangle of trees? As you round that curve, the first proposed array there, there's like I'm just working, just so you know, from Mark Healy's report, figure 3, the aerial there. There's like a little triangle of trees there. Doesn't really buffer any of the neighbors, residential neighbors, but just, would those have to go for the angle of the solar panel?
If I'm correct, I'm pointing at this
Yes.
triangle here.
Yep.
Again, they would not. The south is away from them,
Okay,
down into the right, so no, those trees would stay as well.
okay. All right, thanks.
I
That's
have
all.
a couple of questions, too, before
And-
you start the staff report.
Sorry, Mr. Thomas, if I
What
could. All right.
treatment are you giving the southerly side of your property? Because that's an approved residential development.
Yeah, right now, we are not proposing any other treatment, fence, or screening along the southerly end. I understand it has been approved. I have not seen what kind of buffer it is there. I was just going to say that that's part of the reason we didn't put more panels along the property line here, or, right on that property line. One, that would be a variance as well, and it would be closer to that line, so we kept them away. And secondly, the trees that would stay there would shade the panels. But as for any other treatment on there, we're not proposing.
All right, well, I might leave open for discussion the idea that you consider, first of all, that's mainly deciduous vegetation on that side. So that's not really an acceptable year-round buffer. You have, right at the moment, I'm going to ask about them next, the panels in the front yard. So my suggestion would be a fence along that side, similar to the one across the rear. And I think since it's a residential potential, it's a residential approval as of now, the same logic. Establish your boundaries. The people that, when they're there, they know where the fence is, they know where the boundary is.
Right.
The second thing is, what is your landscaping proposal for the panels in the front yard?
The panels that I'm
Yes.
pointing at here, we had not, because that wooded area is there and present, we had not proposed any additional landscaping in that.
But what about the entire frontage of your property? They're plainly, clearly visible.
That is true. They don't require a variance. We didn't see that as a major impediment to the traveling public looking at, carports versus other parking areas and
Well,
spaces.
the traveling public is subject to what's the rear and the side of the building, and it's not the front of the building. Now, and the traveling public is subject to the huge the detention basin that doesn't have any landscaping anywhere. And now we're going to be subject to solar panels sitting out there in the free, and this is a front yard, all right? It's not,
Understood.
and I think we need to start talking about what we're going to do to hide them or move them. I think they belong better back in the corner with the other ones, even if you have to cover more of the parking lot.
And Mr. Thomas, when we met with them, when staff met with them, we knew the board would have a concern, and we did spell that out to them on numerous occasions, that we thought that the board would prefer that they be located mainly in the back and out of view due to the hardness and inability to screen them.
I want to go on record as agreeing with Mr. Thomas. It's
Okay.
ugly the way it is now.
I think we get this, go ahead, Peter.
Mr. Alderman, when we first designed a plan and sat down with staff, were there any panels in the front of the building where they're currently located?
Yeah, they were in the front. There was another section in the direct front as well.
Okay, and were there some additional panels in the rear?
Yes, there were.
Okay, can you indicate to the board where we had proposed panels in the
Yeah,
rear?
we had some panels along the driveway here, the circular drive, and in this section here as well, up against the building.
Okay, and the ones in the front, we removed, again, for aesthetic reasons, we took those out at the beginning?
Correct, the ones that were in, I'll say, the easterly lot closest to the main driveway.
Okay, and then Mr. Thomas asked the question, can the ones in the front be moved, or what happened to the ones in the rear, and can the ones in the front be moved to the rear?
Right.
Can you indicate why there are no panels in that section in the rear?
Yeah, and let me just start with the most rear circular area. If you see the easement, Texas easement crosses that parking area.
Okay, you don't have to explain to me why they're not there, I understand.
Well,
But why can't they be
Yeah.
in the other
Well,
part of the
stuff. We'll
parking
get-
lot,
right.
right next to the ones that are there? There's only 4 panels.
Right, so this area is no good, so you understand that. These two areas, the fire official had some concerns about blocking getting close to the building. Now, we were showing them basically fully developed with panels, so there is a potential, if there's only pieces of them in those areas, that we think we can work with fire official to get some of the panels.
There's no variance with the existing set of panels that are there in that parking lot. No, there.
Right.
Why can't they be joined to that and the whole thing moved over a few feet away from the building? Like I said, there's only 4 panels.
That's where we had them there, Mr. Thomas, and John House asked us to move them out of there.
I thought you
Well,
said it was
I
on
don't,
the other
that's,
side.
Down to the front row and just slide them to your left.
Take that whole arc and just slide it to your left and make it straight. You have panels on that side already.
I think John's concern was originally they were going to be much closer to the building. I think you can fit those and still satisfy John by moving it over a little bit.
You know, we'd be happy to have that discussion with him.
Yeah.
You know, we would have preferred to have them all to the rear of the building. It wasn't our intention initially to have, we took out a large chunk of them in the front originally, and if that section that's currently in the front could be moved, we'd be happy to move it. But I think we need to have John House involved in that discussion.
But before you have that discussion, where they are now, the 4 panels, they're on that curve. Yes?
Yes.
These four I'm pointing at,
Why
yes.
can't you take those 4 panels and slide them to the left, as Mitch is looking at it, and put them on the row of, that's on the property there?
That's where he's marking it.
You gotta see, yeah, right there. Why can't they go there?
On this line I'm pointing at?
Yeah,
The-
because you already have panels facing that way,
Right.
so it's not the angle of the sun or anything
Well,
like that.
the treetops were far enough away here that the angle of the sun, that they can come over the trees and get enough.
The treetops on
Once
the
we're
other
right
side.
up within 15 feet of the trees, then we get,
They're pretty tall trees on that other site.
No, it's somebody
Yeah.
else's property. All right,
Yeah.
that's the answer. Okay,
Right.
fine.
but putting them back here, I think as Peter said, we had basically, I think the last time, showed it mostly all encompassed and blocked off. If we can put pieces back there, I think we can probably work with Mr. House and make him happy and satisfy the board as well. If I could, just because we're trying to fit them all, and again, as we spoke with the client, he's the whole time been willing to work and juggle these around the site.
Well,
These,
could you fit some in and eliminate some?
I mean, we can always look at that. I guess my question is, if we have, these two, obviously, I think you're saying are right out front, and I understand that. As we come around for these two, they seem to be blocked. The wood, I know it's more deciduous here, but if we can get a combination of some extra screening along there and leave those two sections, if that would be a kind of an even balance with the board, we'd like to have an option of looking at that as well.
Have you looked at putting them on a roof?
Here's,
I don't know if the structure's set for it, but have you looked at it?
Yeah.
Well, it's,
We can have our other experts. The short of it is that there are a lot of air handling units on the roof,
Yeah,
and
I
it's
never
not all
looked at the
flat,
certain
but
archi- The building has a certain
I don't even
architectural
know if
look
it has
to
a
it.
flat roof.
You ought to look at putting them on the
It's
roof.
very ornate
you can
roof.
angle them on the roof.
You don't need that much of a structure. You just need the panels tilted in the right direction.
But I'm not,
If that becomes the crucial element.
I think, like I said, Mr. Pettit, we can have a discussion with Mr. House, and I think,
It doesn't have to do with Mr. House. It
Well-
has to do with the fact that there's an aesthetic problem with the panels, and try to put them on the roof if you can.
and we'll provide
What House
testimony.
is going to say, I already know what House is.
Well, John,
All right.
we've engaged in discussions with John. John is an individual that you can work with.
I know, but
Yeah.
John, you already had the discussion.
And that was his druthers. He would prefer not to have them near the building. I mean,
Oh,
you know,
okay, all right. He wasn't rock-
Well, I think what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you originally proposed to put the panels along the entire stretch of those two parking bays.
that is
And your
correct.
suggestion is you'll meet with him to see if perhaps you can put it in, maybe not the full extent, but maybe portions of it, and still satisfy
Right.
John's concern about access to the building.
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're not engineers, but if we, as a board, determine that we don't want those panels there, then, and we approve the rest of the project, we approve it with the condition that those panels have to be moved, and let them figure it out.
okay,
If they can't figure it out, they come back. So. I mean,
that
we don't-
sounds okay to me. I don't want to leave it here tonight where there's going to be a discussion. If it can be done, fine, and then if it can't be, we look here 2 years from now when they're out there.
No.
Because if those panels are going to be in that position, then I think there's a need for a different kind of landscaping in the front street landscaping.
I think there's a need for that regardless.
I'm
Well, there
pretty,
is.
I'm
That's
pretty
another
sure
issue. The other
they can fit them there.
point I would like to ask is whether it would be possible to say that the fence in the back and whatever's going to be done on the side and the landscaping that goes with those items be done before the solar panels are installed. You know, this is I believe, close to a 13-year-old construction site that's never been completed. So I would hate to see the panels up and then wait 7 or 8 years to see the fence and everything else.
To make that a condition, there's no reason not to. I mean, say they either have to be done concurrent with the installation of the panels or prior to, report,
And-
word it, whatever. See, at the end of the day, it's the approval we give is what it is, and, you know.
Well,
not,
I'd
and
also
all.
like to add in advance then that any front streetscaping that we have or require also be done before the panels be installed. So that for once in this project, the public is taken care of first. I mean, this is a facility, it's beautiful, it's functional, but it's been operating and functioning, and it's not completed. And maybe we could even sneak a condition in that somebody go along the perimeter, and maybe when they put the fences up, this will happen, and pick up all the construction debris, the paper, the garbage, and the fallen over power supply, the wooden frame that held the power supply, the temporary power to the building, is just toppled over at the edge of the parking lot. Maybe all of that could be cleaned up too, after 13 years.
The site does have a history of, you know, slowness that works against it. You do understand.
I understand, Mr. Orsini, and I'm sure that we can craft some language, Mr. Bryce and I can talk about some language that we can put in the resolution that would address the concerns that all of these things be done, at least at worst-case scenario, simultaneously with the construction of the panels or prior thereto. And obviously, there has to come a point when the township, we're going to have to bond for certain things, and I'm sure this building is still on a bond from the original. I don't think the original bond has been released, so there's things that can be done. But obviously, a bond is one thing, completion is more important than the bond, but we can come up with some language that I think will make the board comfortable that those things will be addressed, both past and future.
Okay, sorry.
Mr.
It
Chairman,
was all his
question?
fault anyway.
What about the upper right-hand corner? Right, no, right next to the, keep going, right in the parking lot, the upper right-hand corner of the parking lot, that row right there. Is there a reason why panels aren't proposed there?
We could,
We can, right in that sense.
Well, I think we had the same conversation that we asked them to push them as far back from the street there so that they wouldn't infringe upon the access and the view shed from the road.
I mean, I think what Mr. Healy's getting at is that they're less objectionable there than they are where we're proposing them now.
It's a question, I don't know. I mean, it is towards the side of the site as opposed to the middle. Coming from the, I guess it would be, I was confused with it, since the north arrow is at an angle, but let's say going southbound on Cedar Grove.
Right.
At least the rear of them would be blocked by the hedgerow there.
Right.
You'd see them going northbound.
I could even see a suggestion to take one of the 4 panels from the front maybe and put it there. To me, it's less objectionable than the 4 that are sticking right out in the front yard. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to be hostile about this, but it is a front yard. It's not a place for that.
I think, Mr. Thomas, I understand your point, that there's a balance there. So if we were to put one of them up in that area and hopefully get at least 2 of them back along the building, I guess the question is, would one in this corner, which is not the front as much, but shaded more as you come north, you think at least one there would be acceptable?
How about just eliminating one? Is that going to break the bank or?
They all add up. No.
I
don't-
understand they all add up, but
You know, Mitch, I think, and I was at all the meetings on this side, I think that those 4 or 5 there are going to fit in the back, and you're not going to have an issue based on the conversation. I think you can work that out with John, and the worst-case scenario is you put one up there, that's the worst-case scenario, but I don't think there's going to be an issue with fitting those back, based on all the conversations we had today.
And I'm going to go backwards, Mr. Thomas. You know, we have had, before we got here tonight, numerous meetings with staff and tried to come up with a plan to try to make as many people on staff happy. Again, we're willing to go back and sit down with them and try to get those, and I understand where the board is coming from. And I think, as Mr. Dominic says, we can get them out of there. And if that's what the board's recommendation is, or order, whichever the case may be, you know, then that's what we're charged with doing.
I understand. You've probably been one of the more cooperative attorneys with applicants that both boards have, and I have no issue with that. My only issue is it's been 13 years.
And I get that, because you and I have had that discussion many times over the last 13 years.
Okay, do you have a second witness?
Well, we still
Or
have
do
to...
you- Oh, you want to go?
I
through
never got
reports,
the
sorry.
staff reports.
Let's do that.
And I will try to go through them quickly. I think we sort of touched on some of the issues that were raised in the reports. Mr. Ardman, there are two reports that were generated in conjunction with this application that we've received. One is a report from Mr. Hauk dated March 14th, 2013. You've had an opportunity to review that report and also to discuss it with the client. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that report has 14 comments. Item number 2 of the report, we will defer discussion to the next witness because that's really not within your purview. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. With respect to items 9 and 12, I'm sorry, 9 and 11, which talk about the striping, I'm going to also have the other witness discuss it, but it is our position that, based on the exhibits, and you're familiar with solar panel installations, are you not?
Yes, I've done several, one in this town, on a field version, but yes, I've worked on several solar panel projects.
And some of the projects that you've worked on involved parking lot solar panels?
Yes, they have.
And some of them are in Somerset County?
Yes.
Okay, and basically, the installation that we are proposing this evening is consistent with all of these solar panel installations that you have done previously?
That's correct.
And basically, the poles that hold up the panels are placed within the striping of the parking lot as it currently exists?
That's correct, and that's what some of the photos we have, if you want to, we'll talk to that exhibit, but it is common and usual for the poles to be placed in the striping within the parking area.
Well, I think the issue is if they are, you need a variance for some of these because they don't meet the 9 feet. According to the way that, the plans are
correct.
written, they don't meet the 9 feet, so you need a variance. I mean, am I right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're
That's
supposed to
right.
be 9 by 8.
That's right.
Yeah, we're at
Need a variance.
we're at
Right.
8 feet 10 inches.
The spaces would then be 8 feet 10 inches
They're,
because of the
Yes.
poles.
Your plan says they're 8 feet, not 8 feet 10.
well,
That's what your plan says, and you need a variance.
right. We have,
So if you want to argue all night about it, fine, but
Yeah.
that's what you need, a
Right.
variance.
so we have in the upper right corner of that plan of SP1, we have the hairpin striping plan.
Right,
Striping.
and that's fine.
Yep.
Get the variance. As far as I'm concerned, it's fine.
And then item number,
Excuse me, are you going to ask for a variance?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
yeah, well, I want to talk about item number 11 also, because that then raises another issue
All right, let's do that.
sort of related to that, Mr. Pettit. Item number 11 talks about concrete piers. Have you talked to the installer? Do you know the width of the concrete piers that are below grade?
They're 18 inches in diameter.
Okay. And,
I mean-
and item number 11 requests that those piers be raised above the ground by an additional 30 inches. Is that correct?
Correct.
So in reality, then, we don't have an issue of a 4-inch or 2-inch variance. We have something more
What
significant.
is the pier, what's the pier width? How wide are they?
The footing is 18 inches diameter, and there are 4x8 steel beams that come up from that.
Okay, so you're losing, and how much space do you have between the pinstripes?
The pinstripe itself is 1 foot.
Each side of the center line?
Each side of the center line is 6 inches. So in that,
It says 1 foot on the plan.
1 foot is the full,
No, it's 1 foot is from the center of that pinstripe to one side.
now the intent is if with those,
Well, that's not the intent. I mean,
Well-
what's showing on the plan, you can fit that pier in.
yes.
So,
Well, we can fit the,
in the 2-foot space. You're asking for an 8-foot space, and you're asking for, and you're showing 8 feet, and you're showing 1 foot for the width of the pinstripes. I don't know how that all works out geometrically. It doesn't sound right, but that's what you're showing.
The issue, Mr. Pettit, is we don't think, and Mr. Ardman will testify to it, that we need to extend and provide that extension that is requested in item 11, that the piers be 30 feet above grade. And,
Inches.
I'm sorry, 30 inches.
Well, do we know why Carl wants that? Jim, do you know why Carl wants
Well,
that?
because at McGarrick, I was just at that parking lot, they have this setup, exactly this setup. And they have them 30 inches high. But I don't know if they got a variance or what they did. I don't know what the reason for it. He's trying to protect the column. He doesn't want the column to get hit by a car and then.
I think it's the same-
That is steel is bent.
It's the same approach with parking lot lights.
Exactly.
You have-
Same
you have-
idea. The parking lot light, you put it on a stanchion so it doesn't get hit. He doesn't want these columns that are holding up your panels to get hit by a car.
You're just providing a bigger target to get hit.
Yeah, but if you hit them, then they're bent, and then you gotta replace them, and that's not so easy to do with.
I understand.
Solar panels and all, any structure,
But-
never mind solar panels.
But as you can see, Mr. Pettit, and again, there are no, to be honest with you, no criteria or guidelines, whether within this municipality or many municipalities, as to whether these things have to be done as requested by Mr. Houck or as we are proposing.
There is engineering practice, okay? It's not a guideline, it's what engineers do as a matter of good engineering practice. That's
And then,
criteria, it's accepted throughout the world.
I understand that, and we,
Agree with it, that's okay, that's your prerogative.
and we've indicated and we've demonstrated with some of the exhibits that these things in many instances, and I think Mr. Ardman can indicate the ones he's had installed, basically are just the 4 inches.
I'm not arguing with you. If the board approves, accepts it, that's, that's the way it's
I'm
going.
just thinking typically for stuff like this that comes down to engineering practices, you go back and you work it out with engineering, because as Jim points out, Carl didn't put it in there because he thought there was a reason to put it in there for a safety concern. And typically the board can do what they want, but typically they say, work it out with engineering. If you can prove to him and Tom that it's not appropriate, the engineering, Tom will work it out with you. But typically the board doesn't spend an hour talking about whether it should be this, especially because you're asking for a variance for it.
Well, the board's not going to spend an hour, let me tell you. Yeah, that's what I would agree with you. You just got to work it out. I don't know, and I don't think anybody up here knows exactly what the standard should be. But, I mean, given the photographs, I assume that you've provided to us of these examples, I assume you're going to do something like that.
Exactly.
It's clear that that works because it's constructed. If you were to show that to Tom or Carl and say, well, this is what we propose, you'll either get an answer that that's fine, or, we want it different here because of, and then, you would work it out. But we can't, we just can't deal with that here. I mean, we can only say, we don't know, we can't second guess engineering. I mean, we can second guess for variances and stuff because we can look at it from a planning perspective, but we're not engineers. So all we can say is, you have to satisfy that condition by working it out with them.
Well, we've had at least a preliminary discussion with Mr. Houck. We have not met with Mr. Zelnick, but we did meet with Mr. Houck, and Mr. Houck indicates he wants this. Here's the concern that I have. If we now put the piers, now we are losing parking spaces. It's just not a matter of asking for a variance.
Right.
It's a matter of now losing, and I think Mitch did a calculation of how many parking spaces, if we have to now put these piers in, how many parking spaces would be lost as a result of the restriping of the lot.
I totally understand the problem, and like Jim said, I don't think that the parking with, space with variance is the issue. It is only if you have to construct these massive piers, so your problem really goes away if you don't have to do that. Because, I mean, based on what Jim says, right, we would grant you the variance for what you're proposing, and we already know that it's gonna be somewhat less than 9 feet, like he says 8 feet or whatever you said, 8 feet, 10 inches.
Correct.
So, but now, this 30-inch massive thing, more, not massive, 30-inch bigger than what you normally design. 18-inch diameter, well, 30 inches above grade.
Right.
Is gonna complicate matters, so you just, I don't know why he put that in there, but, we can't.
And the issue, and again, I think Mark hit it a little bit, in that he treats these things as lights within a parking lot, and they are not. They're a completely different animal. And again, you also have a situation, again, when you're looking at a concern about these things being hit, anything has a possibility of getting hit. But here you have a situation where you have a parking lot that's used by a church on a Sunday, and basically it's a little different than putting them in the Bridgewater Commons where cars are going in and out all day. You have a trip in and a trip out. So, and you also have the same people coming to the facility every single Sunday to use that parking lot.
All great points. I don't disagree with you. You just have to make them to him.
But the question is, if I make those points to him and he says, still put him in, that doesn't make him right.
This is true.
And again, there is no standard, and again, I have another witness who'll testify to that. And I think the issue is the board can indicate that we don't have to do that. It's not necessarily only an engineering issue.
No, you're right. The board can indicate, and I think if you were to get an approval tonight for, with whatever conditions we impose, such as the ones we've already talked about, then that would be an indication that the board looks favorably upon the concept. With that, you still have, we always make those conditions that you work it out with engineering, I think if we gave you an approval tonight, it would sort of imply that. We see that that's, the exhibits are before us that, if this is working at St. Peter's, where the conditions that you just mentioned are probably not satisfied, or at Stevens Institute of Technology, or, in USA Park, Florida, then chances are good it'll work here. But,
And it's not a question of working, it's a question of, how much protection do you provide, and is it overkill?
Here's one of the problems that you also have. Forget about the parking and the implications on parking. But what about maintenance? If it's in I'm going to say caisson, it might be more difficult if there is damage to it to fix. There's other considerations that I don't think this board really has the expertise to figure out. And there might be another technology that could meet engineering concern. But really, we don't know what the building code is for that and what's required.
Which is why this board has, and the zoning board has consistently said, for these type of issues, work it out with engineering, and 99% of the time, you work it out with engineering. It does. I don't think it's fair for the board to have to try to spend the time considering this when it's really not within their expertise. They're going to give an indication, I think, tonight, as Mike just pointed out, that some of these seem to work. Work it out with them.
Yeah, the thing we none of us knows is, why exactly Carl put that in there. But, like Vince said, in fact, I would up that from 99%. I've almost never seen an issue where we've said work it out, and an applicant's come back and said we can't work it out.
Well,
Yeah, I think it boils down to, I think Jim hit the nail on the head. I think it's probably, in Carl's mind, standard engineering practice for obstructions in a parking lot, like a light that's in a parking lot, not outside of an island, to have this protection. So I think that's the same, you do it for parking lot lights. These are obstructions within the parking lot, similar to a parking lot pole. So he's making the same recommendation. I can't imagine he'd be saying anything different if he was here.
I'm sure that's his recommendation, but again, I often have a saying, if we listen to all the professionals and their interests, every development would have fire lanes, trees, and no buildings, because everybody wants to protect something, but, then the building sort of gets in the way of what everybody wants. I mean, in life, we all have, desires, and we want to create the perfect situation, but,
Actually, and we don't have to set up with dangerous
Hey,
situations.
Peter.
If you think it's dangerous,
yeah.
Peter,
Yeah.
let's just go on to the next.
Okay.
witness. I doubt you can look around Franklin and say that any buildings in Franklin have lost the battle, so.
We will attempt to resolve this with the engineering department, but I do want to get additional testimony on the record.
Well, you've got your other
Yeah.
experts, so let's go.
Okay.
So just to clean up the easy items on Mr. Hawkins'
yes.
report. Skipping number 2, under general comments, the rest 1 through 6 are fine. He has said no objection to the waiver of the environmental impact statement. Again, it's over the top of existing pavement, so there was no drainage impact, no tree removal. That's why we had made that request for the waiver. Traffic impact, again, Mr. Hawk had no objection to granting a waiver. There's no additional traffic.
You don't have to tell us
All right.
about the ones that you can comply with, just
All right.
tell us the ones.
Yeah, the other issue we need to discuss very briefly, and it's not that we're opposed to what Mr. Hauk is requesting on items number 13 and 14 dealing with the lighting plan. And I'll have Mr. Ardman address it.
The quick question on that, we showed lights to be placed under the panels, under the carport structures. The problem we have, and we've run, as you know, the lighting program as much as anybody you've seen in town. The program doesn't work real well when we try and show an obstruction of what might be these carports from the existing lights that are out there, or how much those lights will benefit. So we try to work some numbers, and they're really not representative. What we would ask is that, pending approval by the board, we would agree to, after construction, go out there with the staff and a light meter to show what those actual light readings are, and to bring it up to the town. We're not looking for a waiver on it, but to bring it up to the township standard post-construction. It's just hard, if I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it, and I can't really tell you that without putting a bunch of floodlights out there that I can say for certain that we're going to get that foot candle.
And we will agree to comply with the township standard, but we will do it after they're in.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? That makes sense?
Some of them that I've been under actually have lights underneath, not like this, but an outdoor light.
Yeah.
Under the canopy.
And
it
these
works
will.
fine, and it works fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we show some, yep.
I don't see that.
Okay.
I don't really see any problem with the other thing either, but
Right.
it's there.
Okay.
Mr. Healy's report, did we?
Yeah, I can speak to that. You've addressed most of the issues. The future caretaker's residence, was that in the original approval?
That's in the original approval.
Okay, so that's nothing new that you're.
That's nothing new.
Just to make that clear. As far as there's been some discussion today about the frontage along Cedar Grove Lane. I would suggest, I don't think they need to propose a really aggressive, solid evergreen screen. I think something probably similar to what the Cedar Grove School did. They have the post and rail fence, shrubbery, tree, flowering deciduous trees, just present a more attractive streetscape as opposed to a wall of evergreen. I think might be just as effective and more attractive.
Yes.
We'll be glad to sit down with Mr. Healy and work something out along those lines.
That sounds good. Okay.
And again, have that done before the panels go in? That should have no effect on the construction?
Yeah, no, if that's.
And the other question I had when you mentioned, I don't know, when you get the drainage, if those were allowed to be in the front, slanting down, does that have any, or in fact, any of this? It's now directing the water to one place on the surface. That has no effect on anything? You don't have to take any precaution or anything?
Mr. Voss can speak more to that, but the short answer is it's really pavement over pavement as any carport structure you might have, or garage structure, so we don't see any issues with the drainage.
Okay.
He's had much more experience.
It's already installed, so that's it.
You know, the rain's gonna.
No other questions?
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please state your name for the record.
My name is Tom Voss, V-O-S-S.
Mr. Voss, you can have a seat. Mr. Voss, by whom are you employed?
I'm principal owner of Viron Consulting Group. We're an environmental consulting company.
Okay, and what does your company do?
We deal with environmental issues, either clean and/or dirty. In this case, it happens to be clean, where we're installing solar panels. We've installed over 1.8 megawatts worth of solar panels throughout various parts of New Jersey.
And has your company, over the years, installed solar panels such as those that are proposed this evening over parking lots that are currently in existence?
Directly, no. Indirectly, yes. I've been involved in some projects like that.
Okay, and can you've sat here during the discussion of the issue of the 4-inch poles and then the piers and extending the piers up. Can you, without asking questions and answers, can you give the board the benefit of your experience in having seen these things built? Are they normally built as shown on the diagram and the exhibits that we provided, or are they normally protected by piers?
They're normally constructed as the diagrams or photos basically indicate, whether they are carport structures, just general carport structures, and/or they happen to be carport structures with solar panels on them. Just driving down here, for instance, today, there was, I don't know if anybody has noticed it, at the Patriot Stadium, there are solar panels that have gone up on canopy structures also. And driving by them, I noticed that they were also constructed in the same manner as we're proposing, basically. There's no concrete coming up higher than flush, basically, for surface grade.
Okay.
So those are examples that I've seen and come across and been exposed to.
Okay, and the issue that was raised in point number 2 of Mr. Houck's report concerning how you deal with, or do you need to deal with snow or rain events, and what effect these solar panels would have in the event those things take place. Can you indicate to the board what your experience is? And
one of the major things that's going to dictate snow sliding off is the angle of repose. For snow, it happens to be, and it varies for different types of materials. For snow, it happens to be 38 degrees. The panels and the canopies are going to be tilted at 10 degrees. So we're not even approaching that angle, which is the critical angle where something will slide off of the surface. So with respect to that, you have, if snow accumulates on the top of the panels and the structures, you're going to have the snow melt fairly quickly. Usually the standard pattern for a storm is you have the snow accumulating, then a day or so later, you have the sun starting to come out and start melting everything. Once the panels get exposed, they're black to begin with, so they absorb more heat. Boom, you have more melting going basically at that point. The panels are also constructed so that there are some gaps in between all sides, so that any snow that does accumulate, and once the melting process starts happening, it'll start dripping down, basically, and fairly quickly. It's my experience that I've seen in all the installations I've done so far. So that whole process gets sped up, and then it just drains down onto the ground. With respect to stormwater, you already have a stormwater plan, I'm assuming, for the site. That's already been implemented. It's existing. We're just covering those existing areas with the structures that we're proposing at this particular site. So the stormwater will basically, or any rainwater or any meltwater that's going to be coming off of the structures is going to be hitting the pavement and then being directed as the site has been constructed to the catch basins, to the stormwater detention basin, and so forth.
so there is nothing that needs to be done or added to these panels to deal with or to address snow?
No.
Okay. No further questions of this witness.
Any questions by the board for this witness?
That's it.
Okay, we'll,
Open to the public.
yes, please.
Make a motion to open to the public.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Meeting is open to the public on this issue. I just set some ground rules since I see a lot of folks. I mean, if you're pro, and if there's one person who sort of speaks or can summarize the points, what we probably don't need is, 20 people coming up saying solar panels are good, if one person can do that, unless there's something palpably new. And the same goes for the anti-solar panel people, if there are any in the crowd. So, just try to use common sense. We certainly do want to hear from you. So, with that, please, when you come to the podium, just please state your name and address and be sworn in by the board attorney.
And just make sure that mic's on, because I don't think it was on before.
No.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is John Shafransky. I live at 28 Crown Road, which places me directly behind the Jane Center.
Okay, Mr.
Incidentally, while
Safransky,
I'm
hold on one sec.
Sorry?
I'm just going to swear you in real fast. You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, very good.
Okay, just gave you an indication of where I live, and, puts me directly behind that property. By the way, if I may make a suggestion, if you're going to have a public hearing, it would really help if the public could see these displays. So if you could find out a way to let more of the audience see that, I think that would be a helpful idea. I have no problem with solar panels. Indeed, I am an ex-physics teacher. I very much approve of alternate energy sources, et cetera. My concern is the fence that we're talking about here. First of all, a 6-foot-high stockade fence is not going to do much blockage for me. At the risk of being facetious, I'd like to see a 100-foot fence so that we could stop the light coming from the illumination of that structure. I don't understand, and maybe somebody can explain to me, why it has to be lit all night long, but that's certainly not what we're here for today. Why does the fence have to go along my property line? Why can't it be on the other side of the easement, closer to what is essentially the property on which the structure exists? That's my concern. Is that a question I'm allowed to ask?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
I'll let Mr. Ardeman. Mitch?
Mitch, use the mic. Take the mic, please. Thanks.
He's hard to train.
On the full, you can see where I'm pointing. On the full far side here, the easement comes across the parking lot in pieces there, so it wouldn't be physically, we wouldn't be able to do that because a chunk of it would be into the parking lot, and we can't put a fence in this section of the easement, so we couldn't.
During construction, there was a chain link fence right along the edge of that.
Excuse me, you can take the mic out if you have to.
I'm
It doesn't
saying
pick up.
they had a fence there. During construction,
Right.
there was, correct me if I'm wrong, a chain link fence that ran along the edge of the property on which the structure exists. Incidentally, does that property extend across the easement? Are they
Yeah.
allowed to come across the easement and put
Yeah.
the fence up?
Yes. Yeah, the property goes from the easement, it goes back to your property line, so I'm not sure which lot.
Did not know that, okay.
Yep, so that was part of the point. So if we were on this side of the easement, which is basically the north and west side, then these lands, which are the Jane Center's lands, the concern was that there would be encroachment over time. So we were going to, the plan does show it on this northerly side, so we were going to put it just up along the property line. From another view perspective.
Encroachment over time.
Right.
You mean from who? From the property owners?
Yeah, if any of the property owners were
Encroach onto,
the open lands that are here.
encroach near the easement.
Yeah, I mean, but in some spots, that easement is over 100 feet away from the property, so there's a good distance between the cleared easement and the rear of the properties. The properties down here, it's much closer. From just a viewpoint, if you're standing in your backyard, a 6-foot fence does help screen more if you're up closer to it than further away. So from just a view perspective, as you get close to the fence, it will assist in
I
screening.
understand. A 6-foot fence would probably block my vision of 9-foot canopies.
And that's the
I
intent.
was, again, being somewhat facetious but somewhat serious. I wish you could do something about the illumination of that tower. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly discuss whether there needs to be illumination 24/7, or there could be somewhat less illumination. I'm sure there needs to be some for security purposes, but it sounds to me like it's excessive, but we can discuss that another time, but it's a reasonable point. Okay. Anybody else?
Um,
Hi, I'm Sandra Bain, and I'm at 19 Domino Road, so I'm right across the street from Jack.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Bain.
Okay. Mr. Thomas, thank you very much for talking about the landscaping and the fencing prior to the building of the solar panels. I really appreciate that perspective. One of the things I kept hearing from a number of people was, we can take those panels and put them in the back, because we don't want the aesthetics to be unpleasant for the people driving up and down Cedar Grove Lane. The problem is, I'm in the back, and if you put them in the back, they're in my front yard, and I don't really want a lot of panels in my front yard. Someone else mentioned a wooded lot. I beg to disagree. There's not much woods left. So much of it has been cut down. And when I stand at the end of my driveway, I look across the street, I see Jack's house, and then I see his backyard, and then I see the Jane Center. But I see some trees here and there, but I wouldn't call it wooded. It really is not an aesthetic barrier for us. I don't think we can count it. And the other thing I might mention is this idea of putting the solar panels on the roof of the Jane Center. If that's a 42,000, did I hear you say that, 42,000 square foot building over there? Obviously, you can't put it on the dome and the temple portion, but that's a huge facility. So I'm not quite getting why some of these panels, if not all of them, can't go on the roof. And then we don't have to worry about the aesthetics from Cedar Grove Lane or from the neighborhood side of this.
Reasonable question. Yeah, feel free to answer that.
Yeah, there is, I believe, approximately about 40 kilowatts of panels already slated for the roof, and that's the maximum we could put on the roof based on the existing equipment that's there. I'm sure you could see it. The HVAC equipment is extremely tall, and one of the biggest issues for that, for us, from our standpoint, is shading. And we can only work with, and that reduces the amount of usable space on the rooftop to put panels down, basically. But panels are already going and slated for the roof. So it's already being utilized, let's put it that way.
Okay. And the last point I'll make is just seconding the idea of a 6-foot fence, because from my perspective across the street, the 6-foot fence is not going to really provide any kind of aesthetic block of anything. We see it all, the lights.
Unfortunately, from where you describe your location, you probably have the unfortunate circumstance of having the least amount of woods between you and the Jane Center. The one thing that I will say is, if you look at the map, according to the testimony, where that little, on the lower left, that little tiny triangle of woods, or whatever, is, at least on our aerial in Mark's report, there's a little triangle of woods there. Right around there is where some enhanced landscaping is supposed to go.
Yeah, I mean, we went out and walked the site with their landscape architect before they even made the application, with the sole intent of trying to figure out the best way to screen the properties to the rear. The main obstacle to that is the gas easement. You can't put landscaping, you can't put structures within the easement. So we thought the best thing, a solid screen would be a 6-foot-high fence, and then putting in keeping the existing trees as much as we can, which I think basically you're not removing anything in the back, so all the trees that are in the back are going to stay, and then putting as much new landscaping in as we can in the areas that remain. And that's basically what they've, in my opinion, they've basically, in terms of that rear, preserving the trees, putting new ones where we can, and the 6-foot-high fence. In terms of this proposal, 9 to 12-foot-high panels, the 6-foot-high fence is going to block most of your view. It's not going to block the view of the parking lot lights. It's not going to block your view of the building, but it's going to as much as possible, screen what they're actually proposing tonight.
What happened with the trees that were existing?
I-
Because there
I-
were a lot of existing trees.
And we received a lot of complaints, and that's why we suggested to this applicant that they meet with us before they even go before the board. That was not done by the applicant. That was done by whoever maintains that easement.
Yeah, the pipeline company.
Pipeline people came in and cleared their easement.
Yes, they did.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Years ago. You'd fly them. You'd fly them, you know.
They
fly them.
They fly them and
They couldn't
identify.
fly them and they couldn't see down, so they cut all the trees down.
Yep.
They're looking for spots of oil or leakage coming
Yeah,
out
they
their
have
pipe.
helicopters that fly overhead.
I'm Jim Novotny, 30 Crown Road. I live directly behind the Jane Center. Front row seats.
Raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give the board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Labotny, could you spell your last name for me?
N as in Nancy, O, V as in Victor, O, E as in Thomas, N as in Nancy, Y.
Thank you.
It's nice that people who want something can hire lawyers to present part of the truth. And for free, I'm going to fill you in on some of the details that they're not coming up with because they don't actually live behind the Jane Center. They're basically doing it from an engineering standpoint. And I have nothing against any religious facility, any religious beliefs, but as far as the Jane Center, with their 13 years, they have a belligerent sense of entitlement that they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, and they can ignore what's going on behind them. Now, many townships have noise rules, decibel rules. If one of my neighbors decides to sit outside of my house and beep his horn, he or she could be arrested. The Jane Center has had for years food trucks that beep whenever it's breakfast, lunch, dinner time, things like that. There's heavy equipment going on all the time. Now, back in the day before the pipeline trees were down, there was a little bit of easement there to protect us from that. But now, there's constant beeping. And I respect that, just like the Sistine Chapel or any other religious facility, they want to show the glory to what their beliefs are. However, from an exacerbation standpoint, we were basically subjected to years of not being able to enjoy our backyards due to people grinding marble constantly from like 8:30 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night. Constant grinding. And while we have had discussions among some board members here about what do we do about the decibel level, including I've downloaded apps for decibels on my
Mr.
iPhone.
Novotny, can I interrupt you? As far as I know, solar panels don't make noise.
I'm about to get to
So
that.
we'll get to it right now, please. Really fast, because I mean, what's already constructed and what's already done is done. Tell us the pertinent issue with the solar panel.
The pertinent issue regarding part of the plan regarding the fence, and it is not being mentioned beside the noise, which another township in the state of New Jersey has allowed solar panels, but they've had in part of their contract that if it's not done within 18 months, they have the right to tear it down or deal with things that are not completed. And so regarding the time frame, they've spent 7 years of noise building other things, and now they want to build what's basically in effect over the Bridgewater Commons parking lot in our backyard with more noise. Another factor is the safety. Our neighborhood has been violated now with crime, with robbery, with property being defaced. And if anybody decides to rob our houses tonight, we're here instead of there. The police can back up the fact that our neighborhood has had recent burglaries. And just like the
Again, relevance to this? I mean,
the Jain-
I don't know much about Jain religion, but I doubt they're breaking into people's houses, so
I'm not
again,
saying that,
where do we
sir.
go?
We have been here for decades fighting the encroachment of businesses behind us into our neighborhood, and we have not been trying to be against anybody's business or religion. But what's happening is now the gas pipeline is completely open to our backyard with the trees coming down, the end of the street where the rental apartments are. Best Foods is not occupied. People are coming in through the woods and robbing our neighborhood. So regarding the relevancy to the fence that you think maybe I'm not getting to the point is the fact that the Jane Center itself was robbed of over $20,000 worth of religious artifacts, which I'm against. And they've had to get security systems, they've had to get a vault, and they've had to deal with crime on their property. And we have had the same type of robberies. And so I believe that a 9-foot fence instead of a 6-foot fence, and enclosing the property, at least so that nobody can cut through the Starbucks property over to our property, because that's what everybody's doing. People are sneaking in through the woods.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. He wants a 9-foot fence. What say you?
First of all, it's contrary to your ordinance, and I understand his concern, but with all due respect, if we were to raise the height of that fence, a 9-foot fence at somebody's property line is probably more imposing, and probably would detract from their property and their property values. It's just, it doesn't
It's
make...
already happened, sir. We have a spaceship in our backyard.
First of all, I think your ordinance is controlling. We would need a variance. I don't think we're inclined to do
Well,
that.
I think, I guess I think you'd be permitted to do it, but I just don't know what the difference between a 9-foot fence and a 6-foot fence would make. I mean, they can walk through down Corporate, they can walk through the adjoining site, they can walk back. The fence is only along the rear property line. They're going to come to the fence, and then they make a left, walk around the easement, and go right into the neighborhood.
Exactly. That's what's happened to our neighborhood. We've been fighting for years. And while maybe it's not relevant to you thinking about the solar panel issue, it's very relevant, because from a sound basis, the solar panels are going to be worked on for as long as they decide to, because that's what they've been doing with everything else, from a noise standpoint. And from a safety standpoint, yes, exactly, you just made the point. Anybody can walk around the fence or in from the woods, and we deserve protection, because it's not just their rights, it's our rights.
And I think the board understands that, but what they're trying to wrestle with is, what this board has before it is an application for a permitted use, which is solar panels, and for the placement of those solar panels.
Okay, well,
That's
basically
what this
I'm
board
trying to do is
deals with.
provide at least input from what it's like on the other side.
Yeah.
So that while you get together and discuss this matter, maybe the more qualified people can come up with something that can give us more protection.
So you're bringing up issues like crime that don't have anything to do with the solar panel application. That's why the board,
It's
maybe that's the
relevant-
disconnect.
It's relevant to a fence would be helpful, some deterrent, because people park right up to the back right now with clear view. People can tell right now from the Jane Center property that I'm not in my house.
Okay, and they're putting up a 6-foot-high fence.
Yes, but basically, inside the building, you can see the property. Not to take up any more time, I just want to bring up the points that there's been an ongoing noise problem, there's now a security problem, and there is no assurance that this project is going to get done on time, because 13 years is 13 years of losing our backyards, and now it's affecting our safety.
We are very, as you
Thank
heard comments from Mr. Thomas, we're very mindful of the timing issue, so,
I
we
mean,
are.
no disrespect, I'm just trying to...
No, that's fine.
cover
We
some
just need
topics
to
that
cut
weren't
to the
mentioned.
chase. So we're very mindful of the timing issue. And yes, the township does have a noise ordinance, and if you think it's being violated, call him. Okay, anybody else?
You gonna swear me in?
Yeah. State your name first, just so I can write it
Yeah,
down.
this is David Kovacs. I'm at 22 Domino Road.
David, what's the last name?
Kovacs.
Kovacs. All right, raise your right hand. You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Being at 22 Domino Road, I'm a little bit catty corner to the rear there of what needs to be put up there as far as where they want to put them solar panels. So like Mr. Novotny's house is over there at 28, or wherever he's at. I'm about 4 houses down, 3 houses down from Mr. Shapransky. Now, looking at that view, there's very little trees that are up there where the garbage is. So my proposal is this. You put a fence all the way around, maybe 6 foot around the property, and then 9 foot around the back. All right, this way nobody could cross over, clean up all the garbage. We don't want to see those panels on the rear, and that's it. That's all I got to say.
Sir, I think the one issue, I understand what you're saying, and I think, are you on the curve of Domino Road?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think the concern or the problem we're going to have is that they're not going to be able to put a fence across the easement. I'm sure they'd be willing to do it. It's only 100 feet of fence. The cost is minimal. I don't think they're going to be allowed to do that by whoever owns that easement. That's the concern.
All you got to do is just put it across the property line. Don't come up to the easement. Just right up to the property line like Mr. Novotny suggested, where the chain link fence was. Just put the 9-foot part right there, and then put the 6-foot part of it along the side so nobody walks around and goes into our development. That's all I'm saying. Just do that. And as far as the solar panels go, I mean, if you were to put those in the rear, you'd need the Great Wall of China to cover that. You know, I'm sure you don't want to go 100 foot high like, you know, Mr. Shafransky says. Just, you know, put them solar panels away from our view. Just put up a fence, put it up a little lower along the sides. Is that simple enough? And clean up all the garbage. That's all. Is that simple? That's all we want. Just so we don't have to see that. Just, you know,
This is at least
so we got a little more safety and a little more peace of mind. That's all I'm saying.
So from here to here's the property line right here.
Okay, anybody else?
Just for the record, there are numerous members of our congregation here, and if they were to stand up or come up and speak, obviously they're here to support the application. All of them are township residents. I'm not going to waste the board's time this evening having them come up, but they are here just for the record.
Understood.
James Gary, 32 Crown Road.
Mr. Garrett, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, my concern is, I'm actually,
Could you do me a favor, sir? You got to speak real close to the mic so it picks up. Thank you.
all right, I'm right next to Jim and the other guys there, 32. My concern is, one, the fence, the location of the fence. I mean, the reason why I purchased my property is because I like the trees that are there. And, you know, everybody seems to be concerned on the panel about the other side where people are just passing through the town. We live there. We look at this stuff all day. You put the fence right in that backyard. If I wanted a fence, I would put a fence in my backyard myself. I like the trees. I like the aesthetics there. Why can't the fence be put on the other side? The little bit of trees that would encroach that parking spot that he was talking about, one parking spot, can be addressed, taken down or whatever. Well, why do we have to have that right behind our houses? Then we can plant other trees, you know, along the rest of that property where they cut them down, at least on the front side, and everybody can be happy. Second concern is about the panels themselves. One, I didn't purchase my property to live next to a parking garage, okay? You know, I don't know if you guys live around that area, but when you go to your second floor and you look out your window, you don't want to see solar panels, and the trees don't go up that high, so you can actually see this stuff. Second thing is, the Jane Center has not been very responsible with their power usage. The lights are on 24 hours, from like Thursday all the way on. You know, you go there midnight, the lights are on. You think, you know, there's a moon in your backyard. You just can't, you know, it's really bad. It really is. Installing these solar panels just kind of, it's like giving them the right to continue to burn energy, but for free. You know, at least they have to be responsible with their budgets if they're burning electricity on their own dime. So I like the idea that the other gentleman here gave about the roof, and I understand that you know, you're gonna, you know, you have other panels there, but I mean, it's really not fair to the people that love this town and came here and elected you guys, you know. Just consider that.
Just to make it clear for everyone in the public that the solar panels are permitted use, that the board cannot tell the applicant they can't have solar panels. They can ask them to add some screening and move them around a little bit, but they're entitled by law to have the solar panels on the site. And they previously testified that they've maxed out the amount of solar panels that the structure can hold on the building.
That being said, I say this, okay? The aesthetics, as you drive by, you're concerned about the panels being on that side. That's basically, there are no houses over there. Why can't the panels be on the front side or on that other, not the front side of the building, which is our side? Put it on the other side, the side where traffic goes through. Put it on the other side where there are no properties, you know? I mean, come on, for crying out loud, you're not going to feel comfortable having a cookout and looking at solar panels. I mean, it's not fair.
Just as a question there, do you know, is there a fence being planned by the, well, approved, but not yet constructed, proposed residential development to the south of you, or are you planning to, or is the Jane Center planning to put up any fencing between them, or is it going to be left to the people who develop that, or?
There could be a fence as, if, I don't know what is part of the existing approval. That particular applicant has got an application coming again. And it is a variance, and it could be a fence, that could be incorporated as part of a condition. I don't want to say that that would be guaranteed here at this point, because I don't know what the testimony is going to be at the next hearing for that particular application. I hope that the public doesn't see us as being insensitive to their needs there. I think that we tried to move these panels in as least obtrusive a place as possible, but there is an issue with front yard placement, and this is a front yard where they originally started to propose these, and I hope the applicant's been listening to hasn't exactly been a nice neighbor.
Peter, you guys don't have any, or do you have any plans for ever putting a fence on that side of the property?
There wasn't any proposed. Quite frankly, there are trees there, and I think Mr. Healy alluded that too. There are fairly significant stand of deciduous trees along that property line. We had not proposed to put a fence in. As a matter of fact, that's why we don't have any panels there, because the trees would block the light to the panels, and you'd be losing trees for the sake of the fence. What we've tried to do is design this so we don't take out any trees anywhere on the site as part of this proposal. And as a matter of fact, because of Mr. Healy's input and some of the other staff members, we've tried to enhance the landscape buffering to the rear of the property to create an additional buffer. And also, just to point out for the record, because I think what maybe some of the members of the public, and I'm getting the impression they don't understand that our property line actually runs to the other side of the pipeline easement. And for some, at least in one end of the property, the northerly end or the westerly end, a fairly significant distance from the pipeline easement. Right now, the one solar panel that we are proposing is 165 feet from our property line. Any of the others that would be relocated to the rear of the property would be greater than 165 feet. None of them would be closer to the property line than the one we are proposing. In one of the areas where Mr. Thomas suggested we relocate some of the panels from the front to the rear, the ones that would be relocated would already be screened by the ones that are already there in the rear of the property. So if we can put them where Mr. Thomas wants them, there's only really one small section that would have some additional panels that would be visible or can be visible to the rear. In addition, as was pointed out by Mr. Healy and some of the others, some of the parking spaces in the rear do not have panels because they encroach within the pipeline, and we couldn't put them there. So the reality is that any panels that we do relocate are probably going to be I'm just eyeballing it, probably 190 to 200 feet from the property line, and again, greater distance from those that we are currently proposing, just so the record is clear of all of those numbers.
Unfortunately, it's too bad the other application couldn't be heard first, because I'm sure it's not a happy thing for people to hear, but I'm sure there's a significant amount of vegetation along that border that's going to be removed, which would probably allow you to have solar panels there, but we can't speculate on that tonight.
Since we're still in public, though, let's finish with that. Do we have anybody else that wants to speak before we, let's move forward?
Hi, my name is George Bain, B-E-H-N, 19 Domino Road.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm that the testimony that you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I'm very interested in the comments, Mr. Healy, that you made when you guys were talking about the landscaping in the front on Cedar Grove.
Mhm.
You made a mention about an evergreen shade or an evergreen block.
No, well, actually, my suggestion was, my personal opinions, I don't think the appropriate or the needed treatment would be a solid screen of evergreen plants. I think something a little bit more aesthetic, with, similar to what's across the street with the school. Post and rail fence, some shrubs, some flowering deciduous trees, so that when people are driving by, they're presented with an attractive streetscape and not a wall of evergreen trees.
Right, I agree.
That's-
Here's my question. Could we consider, because, we're all concerned about the view that you have, and I would really invite you to go and stand in our street and look at the view that we have, because everyone keeps talking about the buffer. There is no buffer anymore. It's gone. There's no
Yeah,
buffer.
so, and actually, perhaps you missed this part, but before they even made an application, I went out in the field with their landscape architect to see what the maximum that could be done to provide screening along the rear. So actually, the emphasis, my report, we didn't even talk about the frontage. We were concentrated on what can we do along the rear. And the rear is constrained heavily by the existence of that easement that you can't plant in and you can't put structures in. So the most that we could come up with, with the applicant, was to put the fence along the back, because that's, it's a standard 6-foot-high residential type fence that people have, stockade fence, 6 foot high, but it's a solid screen. And that's going to go along the entire rear. And then, I understand that it's showing, solid, and when you look on the aerial, it looks like it's solid, but you can see through it, especially, before the leaves come on, you can see through it.
You're right, but let me I just want to make it clear to everyone, there's nothing to see through. There is nothing there. I mean, you see the back of Jack's house from Cedar Grove now.
It's especially towards the, I guess, bottom left. It's,
Right.
it's more open than even,
Actually, I guess we're over here, right?
No. You're off that map.
Over here.
No.
To the left.
You're to the,
These are the houses. This is our property.
yeah, right, in that area, it's pretty sparse.
Is it possible, I guess I should have just asked you this in the beginning. Is it possible?
Could you do me a favor, just use the mic because it doesn't pick up well? Thank you.
At that point in their property that they have control over, before the easement, could some sort of evergreen blind be replanted to sort of close?
Some fast-growing evergreen, like Leyland cypress or something, that would
I
give
think-
them a screen?
There are trees there, and they'd have to be, there are some, they'd have to be shade tolerant. I don't know if rhododendron, something,
Something,
they could look into it. They do have a landscape architect on staff. I'm sure he could offer some suggestions on the types of trees that can be put there.
before the houses.
Because, the other interesting thing, we talked about the people who control the easement clearing.
Leyland cypress.
Most of that clearing that
Brandon's
occurred
corner.
last spring, I guess it was, it all occurred in that area.
Yeah.
I mean, it was severe. I mean, and they touched a little bit along the rest of the way. but
The
it
sense
really
we
was-
got is that they even went beyond their easement a little bit here and there. That's
So maybe
the
we
sense
could
we
be
got.
asking them to come back and help out a little bit.
I trying to
In that
prove that
corner
now is.
that we're talking about, that, yes, that's between the solar panels and the houses. It is a little sparse there.
And that's where we had proposed some enhanced landscaping down in that corner.
Yeah, but I'm talking about closer to the fence.
I just don't know what more,
Between the,
realistically, I don't know how much more of a solid screen you'd get than a fence.
something like Leyland cypress, a
I mean, they'd
fast-growing
grow,
evergreen.
they'd grow above in
Yes,
time.
and give them in height, in a few years,
And it would give us some aesthetics
it
from
would be
our.
way above the fence.
I mean, the
Here.
top
It
of the
wouldn't
structure
take
is beautiful.
many along there.
It's sparse right in here.
It is
I think
sparse.
if the board wanted to impose that as a condition, I think we can work with the
I
applicant's
think it would help
professionals.
the neighborhood quite a bit to do that.
Thank you for clarifying what I was trying to say. Thank you.
Next person or person?
Donna Holly, 27 Crown Road.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I'm not going to repeat a lot of the things that were asked tonight because I think you pretty much got the feel how we feel on Crown Road. There was 2 points that were made, and I can't remember who made them. I think it was you, Mr. Thomas, that said, why do they need so many panels? I mean, if they covered the roof, they have the maximum on the roof, is it necessary to have all the panels that they're planning? I mean, is it necessary? I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I don't think that question was answered.
Jesus, Pete.
The system has been designed to offset a certain amount of electricity. And the constraints, the site constraints that are there, we've designed a system to maximize what we can get with the existing areas on the site, with the constraints that we have with respect to the easement and such. So what you see is the maximum that we can do at the site, without the exception, obviously, of the parking lot area up to the upper right there. But there were constraints, all that gray area, basically. You could do something there, but I believe that the Jane Center, for aesthetic reasons, they wanted to have and I believe also religious reasons, there's a clear view to the east, in essence. So when you look out of their temple, you have a clear sight, and it would not be obstructed by panels and or carport structures. That was one of I mean, that's a constraint that I have to work with respect to when designing this. So we've maximized what we can do on the roof, and then we've maximized what we can do with respect to town restraints, site restraints, and the carport structures that you see right now. So we can't really do much more than what you say.
No, I don't want you to do more.
No, I know, and you want
to
to see
consider
less, yeah.
I don't see more. Maybe we have room for it.
Yeah, we're not at 100% of use. We're not even reaching that.
Okay. That was one. And then the other thing was, I don't know if it was clearly established that all of the fencing work, whatever is going to be agreed upon, and I really appreciate your suggestion of the 9-foot fence in the back and 6-foot surrounding the whole entire, I think that was a really good one because it encloses. But I just wanted to bring one more point, which was, I think also, Mr. Thomas, you made that too, was to have all of the fencing and also the screening with the plant life that you're going to use done previously to the installation of the solar panels. So at least we can see what's going to be helping to screen our neighborhood before the panels go up. That's it.
Never see anything.
Anyone else before we move on? One more person? No? Close.
Another one?
Hi, Michael Azarek, 17 Domino Road, and I'm directly across the street from David, next to George Bean, and we're looking towards the temple.
Just raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, with this plan here, why on the residential side, we have to have the solar panels? If I were to decide that I want to put some solar panels in my backyard, I'm sure that the town would say, no, you can't do that. You know, you're in a residential area, and we don't want this.
Not true.
You can.
Actually, you can't put them in the front yard. You wouldn't be able to put them in the front, you'd have to
I'm
put
sure
'em
my
in.
neighbors, you know, when we came to this meeting, would object to me doing that.
Well, you wouldn't have to come. You're entitled by right, just as they're entitled by right. The only reason they're coming here is because they're not a residential use and they have to do the site plan, but they're entitled by law to do what they're doing, just as you are.
If you wanted to.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering why, you know, the panels have to be along the back, you know, because obviously the town doesn't want them to be seen from the front of the street on Cedar Grove, but it's okay to put them in the back. You have all this empty space on the side here, which abuts other commercial properties. And if I believe, I think that they ought to be facing south, is, and that would be like in this direction here, and it would probably make more sense to put the panels here and just some kind of screen, you know, along Cedar Grove, so that you don't see them from the road.
You know, just put another row here.
Right.
I just
You
don't
can't
think,
block
you
the fire
know,
lane.
for all the stuff that you're talking to do, just have use solar panels in the backyard, I just don't think it's a.
They are along that side that you mentioned,
Where are they?
right where your hand is.
These are the solar panels?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, so you have some there,
All the tan areas are solar panels.
all the ten, okay.
And there's a fire lane there that cannot be blocked.
Again, those are some of the site constraints that we
And I
have.
guess I'm like somewhere around.
Keep going back. You're off the board,
You're off the board.
Over here.
Yes.
further back into lower end.
Okay.
And they own all that land in between.
I was just wondering, like, someone made a point about putting in some plantings and everything like that. I don't know, you know, a 6-foot fence, these panels are gonna go up 12 feet, all right? You know, I'm not an engineer, but I think I'm gonna be able to see them. And I would think that maybe, sort of like what they do along the interstates with the sound barriers, maybe they can put some kind of artistic sound barrier to block the panels from the development, put some planting in front of it, and then we don't have no worry about, you know, seeing the panels from where we are. Because you're talking here, you know, probably, you know, these are 20 feet. Am I correct here? These are 20 feet, that's 100 foot?
Approximately, it's 20 feet out from the edge.
Could you use the mic, please?
The width.
Okay, okay.
And it's probably a little bit more than, if it's 20, yeah.
Because from like this back
about
area
120 feet.
here,
Mike, take the mic out.
all right, from this back area here, I believe the panels are going to be facing this way to get the maximum sunlight.
They'll be somewhat flat, but they may be pointing, I have to look again, but I believe they're pointing, sloping inward towards the property. So
Okay.
what you're going to be seeing from the backside is more the underside. You won't see the actual panels.
But if you put some kind of barrier.
There is.
Yeah,
right
there's
where
going
you
to, I think
pointed.
there's some plantings slated for that area.
All right, well, you know, I've learned the hard way with Hurricane Sandy that you could have shrubbery there one day and nothing there the next. So I would just suggest that some kind of wall right there by the panels, similar to like one of the sound barriers, so we do not see the panels. Then you can put some plantings on the other side, and we don't have to worry about, you know, the shrubbery and the trees ever disappearing.
Sir, I think right here. Sir, right here.
Okay.
I think a 6 or 8 foot high fence on the property line is actually going to screen it better than a 6 or 8 foot high fence next to the 12-foot. You know, you bring the fence closer to you, it's going
No,
to.
I'm talking about a 12-foot fence right where the panels are, so it goes up to the maximum height of it, so there's no way that we will be able to see it from our properties.
Okay. Okay, but you'll be, okay. I'm just trying to figure out what would be the aesthetic benefit of that. 'Cause you'll be
Well,
looking at
then you do
12 foot high.
plantings, you know, just like they do with the sound barriers along the highways. You have the fence there, they do the plantings in front of it, it all blends in, and no one knows that there are, you know, solar panels behind it.
Just, I got to make it clear that and I'm sure the applicant's attorney would agree with this, this board's hearing a site plan for permitted use, and they can put reasonable conditions upon that. A barrier or a 12-foot fence, it would be, I would think, would be an unreasonable condition to put on, since this board, and I don't know if any other board in this township has ever required to that extreme for something that it's a permitted use. So just, the board can do what they can do as long as it's reasonable. A 12-foot fence or a barrier is probably unreasonable condition, and I'm sure the applicant's attorney would take issue with that.
I think all we're asking is that the board give us their assurance that these panels will not be visible from our houses. And how they work it out with plantings or whatever, you know.
Well, the board can't give you that assurance. The board can give you an assurance that they're going to do everything they can within the powers and the law to provide the best screening that they, and I think they've made, the board, we spent a long time, and I think every member of this board has made it clear that it's very important and your concerns are, but realize the law only allows this board to do certain things. They can't go above that, or we have issues with that.
We can go above it, but we'll get sued.
Right.
But we'll get sued. That's simple.
Okay, and I hope like the board agrees with what's mentioned before, that all this is done before the panels are started construction, and there be some kind of time limit on how long that construction's going to take for the panels?
That's controlled by state law, and they pull building permits. And site plan approvals have a statutory time limit to them as well.
But we can certainly require the timing. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing no takers, I move to close the public
I
portion.
move to close to the public.
Second.
You just did.
Are you seconding me?
Second.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay.
in
Peter,
favor?
anything further?
Just very briefly, I think Mr. Dominic accurately pointed out, what we are here for is a permitted use and a site plan. The only variance that we are seeking, as testified to by Mr. Ardman, deals with the panels which are adjacent to the professional building to our north, and were not the panels that are the subject of the discussion this evening with the neighbors. I understand some of the concerns that Mr. Thomas has raised. As I said, Mr. Thomas and I have had a discussion over the years regarding this site, and some of the conditions that you intend to impose, I think, are reasonable and called for under the circumstances. We, before we came to this board, took great pains to try to work with the staff to figure out the best place to locate these panels. And obviously, it is apparent that wherever they are, somebody's going to be unhappy. We can't make everybody happy, whether they're in the front, the back, the side. We are willing to go back and work to relocate those panels out of the front, and I think probably most appropriately, if we can get more of them along the professional building, is probably going to be the less intrusive. And if we can actually get some of the other solar panels between the westerly-most panels and that other section next to the building, we have now not moved any of those solar panels any closer or made them any more visible to our adjoining neighbors than what's already been proposed. I think one of the things that we have tried to do with the fencing, and I understand anytime anything is proposed that involves change or something that somebody perceives to be unpleasant, they come to the meetings and they say, I want. And I understand all of that and I get all of that, but sometimes when people ask for 9-foot fences or 10-foot fences or other things, they're not going to get what they think they're getting, because if you have to sit in your backyard and look at a fence that high, I don't think that is something that they're going to be very, very happy with. Fencing and screening are appropriate, plantings are appropriate, but when you start to imprison somebody with tall fences, I think in the long run you are going to do a disservice to those property owners, not provide to them a benefit by putting a fence that high. And it's not a question of money or economics, it's a question of aesthetics and what they're ultimately going to be happy with. And sometimes people think that higher is better, and the gentleman talked about sound walls, but if you see large walls or large fences, they are unattractive. And I think that if you impose that condition of a fence above 6 feet, you're probably doing, I would respectfully suggest, a disservice to these property owners. Again, we are willing to go back and work with the staff to see what we can do to relocate those panels out of the area where they are presently located in front of the building. If the board has no objection, we would prefer to move some of those to the side of the property line closest to the professional building, again, in order to minimize the impact to the property owners to the rear. The thing that the board has to understand, and I think they do, but churches are a permitted use in the R40 zone. Many years ago, we came in and received an approval pursuant to the zoning ordinance, and they are permitted. We took a longer period of time to construct the church than was hoped for and anticipated. But, it's interesting, some of the complaints that were raised by the neighbors, there are noise ordinances in this town. And this town, I know, has enforced them in the past because certain people I know have received summonses. Interestingly enough, Mr. Novotny says, well, I hear noise between 8:30 and 5, which is when somebody is allowed to work and make some noise in the town. If he was here complaining that somebody was making noise at 9 or 10 o'clock at night or on Sundays, then obviously somebody was not doing their job in the township. But, if you're going to build a church, or if you're going to build a house, or if your neighbor's going to build a deck, there's going to be noise. And those things happen, and there will be noise during the construction of these solar panels. But that's a function of what has to be done. Again, your township, as all townships do, have ordinances that prescribe when we can make that noise, when we can't make that noise. I believe, and I don't think there were any complaints issued, that we violated any of those ordinances during the course of construction, and the town and its inspectors are normally very diligent in making sure that builders do what they're supposed to do during these projects, and I think to some degree the testimony of that one witness sort of bore that out. If the board feels it's appropriate that some of the landscaping that we're talking about and some of the additional landscaping that hopefully we will work out with Mr. Healy be put in advance of the solar panels, I think that can be done, except in some areas where we need to at least leave some clear area for construction, but obviously in the front of the property, some of the trees in the back, we can get in early on. I also think that the suggestion that Mr. Ordman made of moving the fence to the property line is a benefit because, again, as Mr. Healy pointed out, the closer the fence is to the property line, the more impactful it is to screen off things. And there's no guarantee that everything will be screened off 100%, but at least you can minimize the impact. My other concern was if the fence were to be constructed on the back side of the easement, and we have a large area that is owned by my client on the other side of the fence, and somehow it is either not maintained or it makes it more difficult to maintain it. It would be better if my client's property was contained within his fence line, so he sees it, it's there, and it can be maintained. If that large area, and it is a substantial area on the other side of the easement, is blocked off by a fence, then I think some problems can occur with either people using that area to dump things or to do things, and I think it would be better that the fence be put along that property line. We have worked awfully hard to try to address a lot of the comments, and again, I understand where the board is coming from. We're willing to go back to do whatever we can to shift these panels around so that they have the least impact that they're going to have, and I'm not going to say they're going to have no impact, because obviously they are. The other thing I would reiterate, which we had a long discussion on, we would, indicate that when we build these panels that we be permitted to build them with the standard common building practice for the construction of these panels, which is the 4-inch post that would hold those panels up, that we be granted a 2-inch variance, and we will try to work out with the engineering department, and we, quite frankly, as Mr. Voss indicated, as Mr. Ardman indicated, while everybody would like everything, we don't think that the additional extending the footings up 30 inches is necessary in this situation, and at least if the board doesn't want to make a final decision, maybe the board can at least render their feelings known in rendering their decision regarding that issue. I would hope that we can resolve that issue with the staff, that I do not have to come back to talk to you. And I do think that with respect to the relocation of those panels, I think that can be resolved with your staff to address some of the concerns that you had. Mr. Thomas and I have had a discussion on many evenings concerning the driveway and that it was never put in the right place. It's been a long time coming, but it's going to be moved, and while my clients may not be the fastest in getting things done, we're getting things done, and hopefully now that the church is up and operational, some of the other concerns that you have will be addressed, and things will be moving a lot quicker concerning the completion of the original site plan. We don't intend to take an extraordinarily long time to finish the rest of the things that we've agreed to do. And having said all of that, again, I just need to remind the board that these are permitted within the zone, that the only variance that we're seeking has really no impact on what we are having the major part of the discussion for this evening, and we would respectfully request that the board grant the one variance, grant the site plan approval. Mr. Bryce and I obviously can talk about, the language concerning making sure that the improvements go in before the panels go in, so that the intent of the board would be protected, and my client would have to abide by that. And I do thank you for your time this evening.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So we can entertain a motion then.
I'll make a motion to approve, but I'd like to emphasize that I think there is a need for something like Leyland cypress in that corner to screen the houses from the solar panels, just on the other side of the fence in the area where the growth is sparse.
Well, then definitely then make that a condition.
Okay, that would be a condition. Also, another point I'd like to make with the lighting. I have suggested to the board in the past that we have a lighting ordinance for residential property, and we have chosen not to do that. We haven't had a lot of complaints about this, but tonight is an example where lighting 24/7 is really an irritant to the neighborhood. The lighting that affects that side of the building that bothers the residents really needs to be put on a timer so you can be a good neighbor to those people.
And I think we can work that out offline.
Yeah.
Also-
This is the first, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be talking now.
That's all right.
One more comment I'd like to make. And this comment, he's going to be surprised, but I have to agree with the applicant. There's no problem with 4-inch support columns, because if a car does hit them, it's the Jane Center's problem, not the public's. That and the problem of the insurance company of the driver that hit the column. So it really doesn't affect the township in any way to have the 4-inch columns there. Okay, and with those 3 items said, I'll move to approve.
Okay, and maybe to your motion, you might just want to add the issue of timing. I think that was.
Oh, yes, I don't want to forget that. These landscapings and improvements, picking up trash, all needs to be done before the solar panels get built.
The majority of them, because.
Majority.
Right, there's some that, you know.
I'll leave it up
Yeah.
to our staff.
Right.
To oversee that.
And I assume that the motion would also allow for a parking, a stall width variance?
Oh, right.
Accommodate-
And also there's a side yard variance, correct? The 19
Yes.
feet that off the, and I think that probably the thing that Seal is assuming is already in there, but we probably need to state anyway, is that we're recommending that the panels in the front be relocated.
Yes,
elsewhere on the site.
yes, we've mentioned that,
And
that
that was
also,
probably
the
almost-
relocation of the
almost a
front
given.
panels, but in a way that does not impinge on the neighbors to the rear. If they could be with John House's closer to the building, I'm sure there's some sort of
Just work it out.
We'll make sure
Plan
that
that
John
will-
understands what the board wants, so he balances. and-
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Chase has some.
Is there anything I've forgotten?
There was some mention of having some landscape planting in the front, at least around the edges of the detention basin. That's certainly
Yes.
something I would like to see, and one point is the more planting you have around or possibly even in a detention basin, the more it transpires water out of the detention basin rather than having it run off-site.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I don't
that's
have any
that's an absolute given, obviously, if there's any solar panels remaining in the front. Like if there's just one strip of them, obviously, the landscaping would accompany that. But I mean, I agree with Ted, we can add that to the motion. I'm not sure, having not seen the plans in a number of years, whether even all the landscaping that was originally prescribed for the site is even in yet.
There were street trees that were part of the original plan that are not in. There's some landscaping that is still yet to be put in. I will have our landscape architect meet with Mr. Healy. We can review what we still owe you and how we can supplement it. I want to be careful. This was a basin approved under the old regulations. I don't know if we would be allowed to plant in it. If we can, I don't have a problem doing it, but we got to be careful that whatever the conditions are for the approval of that basin,
I'd like
maybe
to
be
add,
maintained.
the current thinking is your tall grasses and your water-tolerant flowering plants discourage geese.
I understand, but again, this basin was approved under certain parameters 10 or 12 years ago. The new parameters are different. I don't know how much, and although I profess to be an engineer at times, I'm not sure how much we can fool around with the basin, but we can figure that out.
Yeah, and I think the discussion we had before about the streetscape was really more about, on both sides of the driveway along the entirety of the frontage. To the degree it's on the approved plans and it's not in yet, I think what the board is saying is if, in association with these panels, the suggestion that was discussed before needs to be in place prior to these panels going in.
It's probably a record-long motion, because we're still in a motion.
And we have one other issue
We're
about
trying to cover
the
everything.
location and height of the fence in the rear needs to be determined.
Oh, yeah, location and height of the fence, we're going to go with 6.
Yes.
Yes, I agree with that. I don't think anything bigger is going to be aesthetically
I
pleasing.
think the Leylands, I have a personal, very good experience with Leyland cypress hiding an ugly spot, and I planted it 10 years ago. It's 20 feet high today, and it's just beautiful. And I think by planting something like that, it's going to be nice for the neighborhood.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just one quick thing, which need not be in the resolution, but in terms of the landscaping along the front, post and rail fence was mentioned, and my concern about that is it works well with the school because of the architecture of the school. I don't think it would work particularly well with the architecture of the Jain
I would agree
Temple.
with you. We would just go with the landscaping on that, I think.
Yeah.
I think it would be discordant with the, yeah. Okay, I think we have wrapped everything into that.
We just need a second.
I would second it.
Councilman Chase?
Yes, and I'd also just like to observe two things. One is that we have pictures here which do show the 4-inch support, although the one at St. Peter's looked more like a foot columns, but, yeah. And you may not want to hear this. I don't think these things are going to look as bad as you think, because for one thing, you're going to be looking at them pretty close to edge on. It's not as if you're looking at a wall of fence even. And if they weren't there, you'd be looking at the automobiles in the parking lot. So I think in the long run, you will find that they're not that bad, and in the longer run, the cypresses will grow up and hide them.
Mr. LaCourte?
I'm going to vote no because I really haven't seen, I want to see the actual plans with the planting and everything and the screening in there. So at this point in time, I'm going to vote no.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Mettler?
Yes.
Mr. Pettit?
Yeah, before I vote, you have some outstanding bills, like the water bill is due. At least in the report is that you owe water bill.
I haven't seen that report. Yeah.
That'd be a standard condition.
And if it is, obviously, yeah, and if I hadn't,
Question for you, and I'm still not clear about it. You're gonna put the fence on the property line that separates your client's property from the neighbors.
That-
And the screening is behind that fence, along that open area? Is that where we're gonna put that?
on our property, that's correct.
You know, of course, between the easement and the back of their property.
Correct.
That's what I just wanted to clarify. I wasn't quite sure. I'm voting yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
I'm going to vote yes. I want to say I have no problem. I think if the plan is followed, I think it will be fine. My only concern rests with the credibility of the applicant. And I think this applicant the town's been very kind to this applicant. It's been allowed to function. It's operating now. There have been some very large festivals. It's now time for this facility to fulfill its obligation to the town and make the things happen in a timely manner and in the way that they're supposed to be. Even tonight, when you say you want things done you want to be able to do it in a schedule and leave it open a little bit to determine it between the town and the applicant, it bothers me because all I can remember is 13 years ago when the ink was dry on the approval, I think the next day they came out and clear-cut 9 acres, which has been a problem for the people in the World's Fair ever since, because you could see right through to almost the Mott Lane. And it sat for years. There was no reason, the driveway could have been adjusted years ago. There's no reason, if the landscaping on the street were done when the construction was started, we'd be looking at mature trees right now and not worrying, we would know what the view is going to be like and whether we can see these things. All I can say is, it says on the plan, there's a future caretaker dwelling coming. I would assume they'll probably be back before the board again, and it would be nice to see that everything is done. I don't know how you can have these massive festivals with garbage along the perimeters of the property, with the debris that's been lying there and blowing all over the area for years. It's time to get it straightened out. I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but it's time. Thank you.
Chairman Orsini?
Yeah, I'm gonna also vote yes, but I totally concur with what Bob has said, and I didn't probably make as big a deal of it as he just did, and I'm glad he said what he said, because I agree with it, because it wasn't necessarily part of this application, and some things I think that offline we can address, like the lighting and the trash, it's a code enforcement issue, and it can already be enforced aside and apart from the solar panels. The solar panels create trash, so that's a different story. But, I didn't want to make it necessarily part of this approval. I know Bob's not doing that, but whatever he said, I think everyone on the board feels the same way. It really is time, and, it's a code enforcement issue. We'll just shut it down. I mean, you don't have to get COs. You don't have to get building permits. It's not a given, but yes.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll be back here at 10 o'clock for the, Peter, are you handling the next one? Is that a?
I got it here. Got two witnesses, we should have a little.
Do we have the whole board back? We have our attorney back?
You can do it, we're only going
Well, you
to,
don't need it. So we're going to carry Renew and Rema Enterprise LLC, PLN 12-00013, until April the 17th, without further notice, and I'll turn it over to Peter, since he needs to give us a extension of action there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peter Lanford appearing on behalf of the applicant. Given the lateness of the hour, and I have at least two witnesses, and I know there's members of the public on this application, it would be probably not make sense to start it now, because we're never going to finish it tonight anyway. So I would ask that it be carried to April 17th with no further notice, and I would hereby grant to the board an extension of time to act through April 30th, 2013.
Okay, thank you. You got somebody behind you, I don't know if that is appropriate.
The adjacent neighbors were here.
okay, just pass him a mic, because it won't pick up if he's, I want the record to be.
I'm Dr. Arthur Perry, and the adjacent neighbors were here in good faith tonight and waited 2.5 hours. We understand the need to table. Neither of us can attend next month's meeting. Can we put it 2 months off, please?
I mean, the deadline for action is March the 31st. He's giving us a month. We're going to hear it April 17th. It's completely up to the attorney. I mean, by law, he could require us to hear it tonight, but we're just not going to get through it in the amount of time. It's already 10 o'clock, or after 10 o'clock. So, Peter, I'll leave that to you to answer the question.
I, at this juncture, have authority to grant you the extension through April 30th. I will talk to my client. I am not going to commit to grant an additional extension at this time. Perhaps I can also talk to Dr. Perry in the meantime, and perhaps, maybe we can discuss what some of the issues that he may have. So his presence may or may not be necessary at the next meeting. But at this juncture, I want to leave it the way it is, and if after I have a discussion with him, I can come back if I think that an additional extension is appropriate. I would discuss it with my client, but I'm not going to do it tonight.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who has the option?
Could you speak into, and we really need you to speak into the mic.
Which side has the option to?
The attorney, the applicant.
Yes, the applicant. Once they file, right, with the township, there's a certain amount of time. I don't know what it is, but there's a certain amount of time. That deadline for action on our part is March the 31st. Since we're not hearing it tonight and cannot hear it tonight, we are moving it to April 17th. Just by doing that, he has to give us an extension at least until April 17th. He's giving us an extension to April 30th. And that's completely within his discretion.
My suggestion is you avail yourself of the attorney, Mr. Lanford's, the ability to meet with him to discuss any of the things if you can't be present, or perhaps have someone, your wife or attorney or someone come if you can't. Because they have a right to be heard. They have a right to be heard by law by that date, and like the chairman pointed out, they've already given us an extension. So,
And the reason we can't continue tonight is?
well, the reason is because typically the board does not hear a new matter at this hour, and typically the board at 10:30 quits, and they may be willing to go a little further, but there's no way that this matter is going to be finished in the next hour, given the testimony and the statements are going to be made.
Just from the number of witnesses we know
Right.
we'll have and the amount of public input we know we'll have.
And both the applicant and the board appreciate it when it is done in one evening, because the continuity, and when you have to wait a month or 6 weeks, we spend a great amount of time reiterating and restating things that the board needs to understand because the continuity is broken.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, and to that point, let's put it this way. If I were to start hearing it now, and I would call it at 10:30, they might get through their first witness, they may get through some reports, who knows? We sure wouldn't be getting to public by then. So, I mean, if that's what you're here for, then that would be almost moot anyway, at this juncture. So, we'll adjourn this to, I mean, that's it. I mean, I'm chair, that's the end of the discussion. So, April 17th, 2013. Do we have any other matters tonight?
Yeah, and what I would suggest too, real quick, what I would suggest too is we have the plans on file, both in terms of the site plan and the architecturals in the planning department. So I'd suggest you come in, take a look at the plans. Either Vince or I can walk you through it, and so you can understand exactly what's being proposed.
Simple. Okay, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Bob.
I have two quick things that'll take about 30 seconds. I spoke with Mr. Vornlocker already. He supports this idea to be a recommendation to the Police Traffic Safety Bureau, who will forward it to the county. And that is to have the county install a left turn signal on Cedar Grove Lane to make a left turn onto Treptow Road. Going toward Middle Bush, a left turn signal. It's getting very dangerous. There was a serious accident a little further up the street the other day. He concurs completely. He would like a recommendation from the board to forward this to the safety department, who will take it to the county. And that can, if you want someone to put that in writing for the next meeting, the quicker that gets to him.
Can we just
Anything
make a
that happens
motion?
is going to come back anyway eventually.
Bob, do you need a motion?
Yeah, make a motion to do that.
We can definitely make a motion if the board wants to. Go ahead, Bob.
I'll make a motion.
And I'll second it.
Put the left turn signal on Triptow from Cedar Grove.
Correct.
And Seal seconds it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
We'll so notify Bob, so he's aware of the
All right.
planning board.
So
side.
that'll
The second thing, real quick, is stimulated by the application that we had tonight, but there are other buildings that apply. This building was forced to rotate its position for religious reasons, and that's fine. But what it has left in the front is two sides to the public, which are basically a rear and a side view, which gives you a view of a building that can almost look like a warehouse. My point is, for buildings that cannot or choose not to front to the front of the property, I'd like to see us establish some aesthetic standards and architectural standards that they need to comply with for those sides facing the front yard. That may not be the front of their building. The front of the Jane Center is not facing Cedar Grove Lane.
So by front, you mean frontage more?
The frontage, correct. Now, I talked briefly with this, about this to Mark. My suggestion is that we allow him, he had some very outstanding ideas. He's much smarter than I am. He could put some of these ideas on paper, and maybe we could look at them at the next meeting, because there are certain, I'm told it can't be legally done exactly the way I'm proposing it, and I understand that. That's why he gets the big bucks. But I'd like that, a motion for that too, for if that's what's necessary.
I don't
for
even
Mark
know
to
if we need a motion. The board
prepare
can-
something.
The board can simply direct Mark to study that issue and bring it to us.
And when you see it, if you don't like it, you don't like it. If you do, we can pass it on to the council.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
We can do that. Yes, Ted?
An idea I had as a result of attending the Raritan Millstone Flood Control Commission workshop last Saturday. And, you know, we all hear about impervious surface. And in fact, I think since I've been on the planning board, I've wanted to see some use of pervious pavement materials, and there's a number of varieties of that, particularly in large parking lots where often a lot of the parking is not often used. And it occurred to me that one way we could favor this would be reduce the allowable by right impervious surface in, say, the M1, M2, and CB zones, but allow applicants to increase their impervious surface above that limit, say by 1 square foot for every 2 square feet of pervious surface they put in. Of course, there are engineering angles to pervious surface. You have to have a good porous substrate underneath it. You have to clean it perhaps yearly or so to keep the pores from being blocked. And it's probably a little more expensive to install, but it can be done. And I think we have an obligation to keep as much water out of downtown Manville, now that downtown Bound Brook has levees, as we can. There's other ideas, such as Seal said tonight, redoing detention basins with tall grass that transpire more of the water out of them, that purify the water that goes through them, and that would be mown maybe once a year instead of repeatedly, as is the case with lawns.
So
And that's
Ted,
the coming thing. So I'd just like to ask the board whether to ask Mark to work on this concept.
So the action item would be to explore iterations of pervious pavement for seldom or little used parking areas, and to, I know I don't know that we've ever done it by ordinance, because I think I suggested it one time, even back before I was chair, to do some sort of detention basin ordinance, and I believe I was told that it's not possible to do that because you'd evaluate it as part of every site plan, kind of on its own merits. But I know that the board has always, at least in more recent years, been very favorable for landscaping detention basins. I'm all for it if there can be something that could be memorialized that says you have a detention basin of a certain design where you can landscape it, then you should, and this is what should be required, and this is how much you should put in. Because it's all about quantitation, right? You have to make the standards achievable and clear. But I was always told that, you don't do that that way. You'll do it as part of the site plan. So I don't know if you guys agree with that? You weren't the one who told me that, Vince. It was.
I think the overall goal is to try to reduce the amount of runoff, and to better handle runoff. I think just the one thing, just so kind of to pat yourself on the back, over the years we have changed the ordinance to address this. We changed the ordinance so that you can allow land banking of parking spaces. Used to just be for 1 or 2 uses, and now it's permitted basically for all commercial uses. And both boards have granted site plans with significant amount of land banking. So there's probably hundreds of it, well, maybe not hundreds, but several acres of what would be just pavement. And the other thing that you've done recently, within the last few years, you've adjusted both eased up the parking requirements for both retail and for warehouses. So again, and that has resulted in, again, probably would have been several acres of would otherwise be just parking lots. So I think what you're saying now is, can we do more?
I'm thinking of this especially for hotels, although, we have a lot of hotels built already. I think there may be another one coming in on Davidson. The Environmental Commission gets notice when somebody files for a letter of interpretation of wetlands, and that's usually the first sign of something, development proposing to come in, and I'm just saying why I think we may have that.
Yeah. I think we can certainly look into it. Obviously, something like this, we're going to have to work closely with engineering. What I've heard over the years, it's not just a matter of the structural issue. I think just the soils, my understanding is soils in Franklin aren't very conducive to pervious pavement, whereas other towns with, maybe more sandy soil, it's not as much of an issue. Yeah, so we'll have to talk to engineering to see to what degree we could rely upon that, and then we'll look to see if there's any other things we can do.
Yeah, and on detention basins, I know you can get lots of material from Chris Obrapta at Rutgers, because he's practically crusading around the state to retrofit detention basins, tearing out low-flow channels and grading them so that water that flows through in a light rain flows in a zigzag pattern so it has maximum chance to infiltrate. Again, the underlying soil can be a problem.
Yeah, we can look into that. Maybe if there's some ways to encourage those things as opposed to just, I'm sure they're already permitted and the stormwater rules already allow it, but can we encourage that in some way?
I will say that one thing I've observed in my years on the board is that landscaping of detention basins has advanced greatly. 15 years ago, you got nothing but lawn, and now you at least get landscaping around it, and we've had a number of wet retention basins, most notably the one at Cedar Grove Manor, but I think there's one on Renaissance. I think one was proposed at the Hindu temple on Corlew Lane.
Yeah. Ted, I think probably, and we'll take a look at this, probably what's going to be most helpful is if the board comes up with some type of policies that they want to direct engineering to address in their reports is probably the most helpful. I'd be very, I think, as Jim would point out, you want to be very careful about us putting any new regulations on what should be done with them, because the law is pretty specific about the design of them. But if we want to direct the engineering department to, when they do their reviews, make that a priority and say, yeah, on a case-by-case, what can be done, who's ever doing the review, whether it's Carl, someone else can surely point that out and make that clear to the board that maybe if they do this, they make the channels different, or if they can plant these, that would.
You know where the Ramada Inn is? If you excavate there, you're gonna find a beach sand that's as pure white as you'd find down the shore. But that's not typical Franklin sand, but there's a big deposit.
Right.
So there you could build any kind of infiltration system, it would work
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I don't know to the extent that, any of this can be codified. It might be more like Vince just said, where you sort of direct them to that, we're interested in doing that. But at any rate, and just in the interest of time, let's just say that maybe you can look into that for us, okay?
Will do.
All right, is there anything else? If not, I
Make a motion to adjourn.